At the age of 38, I found myself before a classroom brimming with seniors, their eyes heavy with sleep, while the majority fixated on their phones or absent-mindedly sketched. One student consistently held my gaze as I spoke about Shakespeare, not in the typical manner that most teenagers regard a teacher, but with a sense that every word I uttered held significance. He was known as Daniel, reserved and perceptive, the sort of boy who prompted teachers to remark, "He possesses an old soul." As the afternoon sun dipped lower and the final bell echoed through the halls, signaling the end of the day, I observed that he remained behind, unmoving amidst the flurry of departing students. He sat there, turning the pages of the Wuthering Heights I had assigned, his brow furrowed as if the destiny of Heathcliff held the weight of the universe. "Daniel," I said softly, "it's time for you to pack up. You're going to miss your bus." He raised his gaze, those rich brown eyes locking onto mine. "I have no objections." I nodded, attempting to dismiss the flutter in my chest. "It's merely a work of literature," I reassured myself. "You are an educator." He is currently pursuing his studies. Yet, he inquired about the reason individuals pursue love that ultimately leads to their own ruin. Catherine found herself unable to embrace the comfort of a safe man. His voice carried a low, contemplative quality, and his question settled uncomfortably near the core of my own marriage. I provided him with the instructor's response, the refined version. Yet, the intensity of his gaze suggested he was inquiring about something far beyond the surface. When he finally departed, the corridors had fallen into silence. I stood in the doorway, observing him fade into the corridor, when an unwelcome thought slipped into my mind. When was the last occasion someone gazed at me with such intensity? That evening, I found myself in bed next to my husband, who was softly snoring after yet another late shift. A soft vibration from my phone signaled the arrival of an email. It was indeed Daniel. The email's subject line stated, "Regarding today's conversation," and in an instant a door creaked ajar. A door I doubted I could ever shut once more. The following morning, I approached my email at school, grappling with the same blend of apprehension and intrigue that had enveloped me the previous night. Daniel's message was entirely appropriate. It delved into Wuthering Heights, exploring themes of love and obsession, and how individuals often confuse destruction with passion. Yet interlaced within his words was an undercurrent, a silent truth lingering in the air. His writing carried a weightiness that seemed out of place for someone so young. I made a promise to myself to remain silent. I reassured myself that it was merely an enthusiastic learner, and I ought to approach it in that light. As I sat in the staff room during lunch, accompanied only by a stale sandwich and the murmurs of my colleagues' gossip, I found myself revisiting his email once more. I responded in kind. "You're right," I typed. "Sometimes people pursue those who scorch them, for in the flames, they at least experience a pulse of emotion. The secure option doesn't always ignite a thrill in the heart." I gazed at those words, a thrill of recklessness coursing through me as I prepared to hit send. A teacher ought not to reveal such truths. Not for him. To no one at all. Yet I hit send regardless. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, Daniel found himself lingering once more after class had drawn to a close. He lingered until the last person had left the room, then made his way to my desk, wearing that familiar, contemplative look. "I appreciated your email," he remarked plainly. A tension coiled within me. He was never meant to speak of it openly. The unseen boundary between educator and learner, between the professional and the personal, faded just a touch further. From that moment on, it settled into a cadence. He lingered after class. At times, the conversation drifted to the realm of books. At other moments, it veered toward the intricacies of college applications, and occasionally, it meandered into the delightful territory of silence. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed, his gaze unwavering as I shuffled papers, feigning busyness. One day, he spotted the pile of graded essays, and inquired if I required assistance in transporting them to the office. I chuckled at the proposal, yet he remained steadfast, and before I could voice my objections, he was strolling alongside me down the corridor, my papers cradled in his hands as if they were a silent testament of his loyalty. It was innocuous. That is precisely what I reminded myself. An accommodating learner. A young lad who held great admiration for his instructor. Yet, the reality was that I started to look forward to it. He glanced up at the clock, watching the final minutes of class slip away, already contemplating the words he might share once the others departed. Within the confines of home, the difference was striking. My husband would arrive home late, weary from yet another grueling double shift. He would press his lips to mine in a distracted manner, the flavor of coffee and weariness lingering on them, before sinking into bed without a word about my day. The chasm of silence that lay between us had expanded to such an extent that I could nearly perceive its echo reverberating in the air. And then there was Daniel. His focus subtle yet unwavering. His ability to recall my words, the questions he posed that conveyed the significance of my thoughts. He observed the nuances, my necklace, the hue of my painted nails, and even the weary shadows lingering beneath my eyes. On a Friday afternoon, as I collected my belongings, he suddenly appeared at the door, holding a small apple in his hand. "This is for you," he murmured, a hint of bashfulness in his voice. I chuckled, perhaps a touch too boisterously, dismissing it as a charming act. "I'm not your fairy-tale princess, Daniel," I teased. Yet I accepted it. As I sank my teeth into it later in the car, the crisp sweetness enveloped me, causing an inexplicable ache in my chest. The tiniest details started to unravel my composure. His proximity lingered just a touch too intimate as we examined the passage side by side. His voice took on a deeper timbre when it was just the two of us. His eyes appeared to delve into mine, seeking something that lingered in silence. One evening, as I was packing my bag, he casually remarked, "I wait after class because it feels different when it's just us." I ought to have intervened. I ought to have delineated the boundary with clarity and conviction. Yet I refrained. In that instant my breath hitched, and I found myself unable to meet his gaze. That evening I found myself wide awake in bed, my laptop precariously perched on my knees, fixated on his name glowing in my inbox. I was aware of the unfolding events. I was aware of the destination that awaited down this path. And still, as I shut my eyes, the image of his gaze lingered, the moment he uttered, "just us." Years had passed since someone had gazed at me with such intensity, and I was consumed by the fear of how deeply I craved more. It occurred unexpectedly, without any forethought. It remained unuttered. It revealed itself in that delicate realm between quietude and revelation, where neither of us could maintain the facade any longer. On a Tuesday afternoon, the exterior sky loomed in a somber gray, with rain cascading down the classroom windows like a curtain of melancholy. The corridors lay deserted, as the majority of students had hurried away before the tempest arrived. Yet Daniel remained, as he consistently did. As I sifted through the papers, my mind wandering, I sensed him nearby, more intimate than before. He lingered just behind me, his voice a gentle whisper. "You seem a bit worn out today." It was a seemingly mundane remark, yet the manner in which he delivered it, soft, nearly affectionate, left me momentarily breathless. I turned to confront him, poised to dismiss the moment with a chuckle, to remind him of our roles, that I was perfectly all right. Yet, as our gazes intertwined, the words became lodged in my throat. He wasn't regarding me in the way a student typically regards a teacher. He gazed at me with the intensity of a man captivated by a woman who lingered in his thoughts. "I don't belong here," I murmured. "Yet you are," he replied with quiet certainty. A fracture formed within me. Years spent in solitude, feeling invisible, drifting through my marriage like a specter. Everything surged forth in an overwhelming tide. His gaze was a hand extending into that void, drawing me back to existence. I attempted to distance myself, yet he remained steadfast in his position. He dropped his voice once more, so softly that I nearly overlooked it. "Have you ever sensed that no one truly recognizes your presence?" The inquiry pierced to the core. A searing pain coursed through my throat. My eyes burned with an uncomfortable intensity. I longed to refuse, to dismiss it entirely, yet the weight of the truth was undeniable. "Indeed," I conceded. My voice quivered, and that was all it required. He extended his hand, not with bravado, not in a wild, youthful manner, but softly, as if he feared I might break. As I clutched the stack of papers, his fingers grazed against mine. It was a whisper of a touch, almost non-existent, Yet it coursed through me with such intensity that I found myself shutting my eyes. I might have chosen to distance myself. I ought to have. I released the papers from my grasp, watching them cascade across the desk in disarray. Without uttering a single word, he moved in closer. His breath brushed against me before his lips ever touched mine. Cozy, uncertain, inquiring. When he kissed me, it was deliberate and tender. It unfolded with a deliberate grace steeped in reverence, carrying an almost palpable sense of longing. As if he had been suppressing it for far too long, I returned his kiss. In that fleeting instant, all else faded away. The accolades, the regulations, the uncertainties. All I understood was that there was someone out there who desired me. Not for the part one took on as a partner, an educator, or a nurturer. However, for my part. As we finally separated, my heart raced with such intensity that I feared it might betray my emotions. "This is wrong," I murmured, my breath catching in my throat. "I understand," he replied. Yet his grip on my hand remained firm, as though he dreaded my vanishing into thin air. I stepped back, compelling myself to collect the scattered papers, concealing the quiver in my hands. "It's time for you to leave," I managed to say, prior to anyone laying eyes on it. He nodded, yet before departing, he uttered a phrase that burrowed deep within me and would not fade away. "I'm indifferent to whether it's right or wrong. You are the sole individual who breathes life into my existence." That evening, slumber eluded me. I relived each moment, his voice, his caress, the manner in which I had allowed it all to unfold. I reassured myself that it was merely an error, a fleeting lapse in judgment, and that it would not occur once more. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware of the reality. A change had begun to take hold. The door I believed I had sealed tight now stood ajar, inviting both of us to cross its threshold. I found myself questioning whether I possessed the strength, or even the will, to shut it once more. I promised myself I would maintain my distance. Following that kiss, I vowed it must come to an end, that it would indeed come to an end. For days, I evaded his eyes during class, maintaining a terse tone and delivering my instructions with a sense of formality. I believed that by constructing the wall tall enough, he would ultimately cease his attempts to scale it. Yet Daniel stood apart from the other boys his age. He held back. He remained silent. He just bided his time. In that stillness, I discovered the threads of my being coming undone. A regional competition has been announced by the school. A weekend retreat where students will showcase their projects. I received a request to serve as a chaperone. I nearly turned it down. Yet, when his name surfaced on the roster, an inexplicable twist gripped my heart. On a Friday morning we departed, the bus alive with the sounds of chatter and laughter. I positioned myself near the front, constantly reminding myself of my role as a teacher, and nothing more. Yet, each time I caught sight of him in the window's reflection, his head lowered over his notebook, the faintest smile playing at the corner of his lips, I experienced that same magnetic draw that had unraveled me in the classroom. On that inaugural night at the resort, all semblance of order unraveled. Once the students had made themselves comfortable in their rooms, the other chaperones opted to head down to the lounge for some refreshments. I declined, citing exhaustion as my reason. Honestly, I was filled with dread. Of my own actions, of his presence, of the potential consequences if we found ourselves alone together. Yet destiny possesses a merciless knack for timing. A knock echoed at my door. My heart sank. As I swung the door open, there he was, moisture clinging to his skin from the rain, his hoodie wrapped closely around him. His gaze delved into mine as if seeking my consent. "Sleep eluded me," he murmured. "May I linger here for a moment?" I ought to have declined. I ought to have returned him to his quarters. Yet solitude possesses an uncanny ability to wear down reason, transforming every ought into a mere just this once. I welcomed him inside. Initially, we occupied opposite ends of the sofa, the silence hanging heavily in the air between us. The rain drummed softly on the glass doors, a rhythmic and entrancing melody. "It seems you've been keeping your distance," he finally remarked. I confessed. My voice faltered. "This, whatever this may be, it simply cannot occur. I am your instructor." He inclined his body, resting his elbows upon his knees. "You hold a role beyond that of a mere educator. You're the sole individual who truly perceives me. The word struck a nerve. My throat ached with the weight of uncried tears. You simply don't grasp, I murmured. I have constructed my existence upon a foundation of principles. Regarding outward impressions, if I break this one, I let my words hang in the air, unable to complete the thought. Daniel inched nearer, his voice softer than I had ever experienced. Perhaps certain rules exist solely to be defied. As his hand grazed against mine, I chose to remain still. I was unable to. As I struggled beneath the surface, his touch emerged as the sole lifeline, anchoring me in a sea of despair. The kiss unfolded, with a deliberate slowness, tinged with a hint of uncertainty, as if he sensed the possibility of my retreat. Yet, as our lips touched, every barrier I had constructed crumbled away. The details of who drew nearer are lost to me. Yet the distance that once separated us vanished entirely. His arms encircled me, and for the first time in years, I experienced a sense of being desired, not as a mere role, not as a mere placeholder in another's existence, but as a woman in my own right. The tempest beyond intensified, mirroring the turmoil within my soul. The boundary I had vowed to uphold faded until it completely disappeared. We refrained from discussing notions of right or wrong. There was a complete absence of conversation between us. We surrendered to the stillness, to the warmth, to all that we had kept restrained within us. As the moment faded, I found myself enveloped in silence, my heart pounding fiercely, his arm resting upon me. A blend of assurance and foreboding intertwined in its embrace. I shouldn't have allowed this to unfold, I murmured, even as my body betrayed me by inching closer. He pressed his lips gently against the side of my face. You have no regrets, he remarked. And the chilling reality was I did not. That evening at the resort transformed everything. There was no turning back, no deluding oneself into thinking it was merely an error. We had crossed the threshold from which there was no turning back. As I gazed at the ceiling, the rain gradually subsiding into a hush, a singular thought resonated within me, overpowering all others. What have I wrought? The dawn that followed was excruciating. Before dawn I stirred from sleep, the faint glow just beginning to seep through the curtains. Daniel lay peacefully beside me, his hand gently touching mine, his breathing even and serene, as if the events of the night held no burden for him. Yet, for me the burden felt unbearable. I rose gently, taking care not to disturb him, and gazed out at the rain-smeared window. Guilt surged within me, a toxic tide that threatened to consume. I had traversed every limit I vowed to safeguard, not merely as an educator, but as a woman who once thought she understood the distinction between right and wrong. As he finally awoke, stretching with the effortless elegance of youth, he regarded me with a smile that suggested I was the finest choice he had ever embraced. That smile nearly erased the panic that was clawing at my chest. Yet, the world moves on indifferent to our desires. The competition concluded, and as the bus rolled back into the school parking lot, I had made my choice. I would bring it to a close. I was compelled to. For an entire week, I kept my distance from him once more. I lingered at my desk long after hours, departed before the class concluded, and maintained my exchanges with him succinct and formal. I believed that by severing each connection, the perilous fabric we had crafted could gently come undone. Yet Daniel clung on, unwilling to release his grip. As the final students meandered out of the classroom one afternoon, he remained behind, savoring the solitude. I feigned an air of busyness, meticulously arranging the papers, silently hoping he would take his leave. Instead, he gently closed the door and leaned against it, his gaze fixed intently on mine. Why are you behaving as if that night never took place? He inquired, his tone subdued. It never should have, I murmured softly. It was an error. His jaw clenched. An error? Am I truly what you perceive me to be? The anguish in his voice pierced through me more profoundly than I had anticipated. I pressed my palm against my brow, trembling slightly. You failed to grasp, Daniel. If anyone discovers this, I stand to lose it all. My career, my standing, my whole existence. He advanced, unyielding. What of my own fate? Do you really believe that remaining silent comes without its own cost? Did you really believe I desired this to remain a hidden truth, buried beneath your remorse? My eyes burned with unshed tears. I felt the urge to express my feelings, to convey that he held a significance beyond what I had ever anticipated. Yet the reality was painfully clear. You will find a way to move forward. You possess the vitality of youth. His voice trembled as he uttered, "It won't fade for me." He stormed out, the door crashing shut with such force that the glass trembled. The subsequent days felt like an agonizing ordeal. He ceased his waiting once class was over. He ceased to gaze at me with that silent yearning. Instead, he became distant, his shoulders tense whenever I walked by. His laughter with other students ringing out louder, almost strained, as if to demonstrate that he was perfectly okay. Yet I was far from fine. Each evening I find myself unable to sleep, revisiting the memories of that night at the resort. Sensation of being truly alive in his embrace after a lifetime of feeling unseen. I reassured myself that stepping back was the correct choice. Yet the void within me clawed at my insides like an insatiable hunger. As the day drew to a close and I began to collect my belongings, a sudden knock echoed through my office door. I glanced upward, anticipating the presence of a coworker. Rather, it was his father. I stood still, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. With a courteous smile, he introduced himself and expressed his gratitude for my unwavering support as a teacher. "Daniel speaks of you constantly," he remarked nonchalantly. My blood froze in my veins. I conjured a smile, my heart racing, each word a delicate facade. Our conversation lasted just a few fleeting moments, yet as he departed, my legs felt as though they might buckle beneath me. If Daniel were to speak of me, if his father harbored even a hint of suspicion, the peril was intolerable. The following day, I took a moment to speak with Daniel privately. At first, he avoided my gaze, but when our eyes finally met, I could see the pain lingering, unhealed and vivid. "This can't continue," I declared resolutely, though my voice quivered slightly. "Not a single glance. Not a single word. For the benefit of us both, this must conclude here." His hands balled into tight fists at his sides. "Is that all there is? Do you have the power to determine its start and finish? You sparked the flames, and now you expect me to dwell among the remnants?" I choked back a sob, my eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I apologize." He gazed at me for what felt like an eternity, each second stretching into an unbearable silence. Then, with a bitterness I had never encountered in him before, he declared, "One day, you'll regret this more than anything else." He turned and walked away. That marked the final genuine exchange between us. Time stretched on, transforming weeks into months. The day of graduation arrived. I observed him stride across the stage, more imposing, more powerful, his eyes drifting past me as if I were merely an unfamiliar face. Yet, the reality remains that I have never let it slip from my memory. It was not the night when the rain fell. Not the way he kissed me as if I were his entire universe. Not in the manner I surrendered, aware that I would never return to who I once was. I concealed it profoundly, akin to a solitary secret I bore within. To all those around me, I had simply returned to the role of a teacher once more. Yet within, I was a woman who had ventured beyond boundaries, savored the allure of the forbidden, and forfeited everything. Even now, as the hall stands silent and I find myself alone with the reverberations of my decisions, his voice lingers, the soft murmur in the break room that ignited everything. "Are you aware of your beauty? And I am certain it will remain etched in my memory forever."